Bojan Bogdanovic signed a contract extension with the Detroit Pistons before their win against the Golden State Warriors. I'm going to give you guys 3 different angles that you could look at this extension and what it means in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. Make sure you go over to the YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button at the Locked On Pistons YouTube channel, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Those are the greatest ways to support the podcast. For those of you guys watching on YouTube, do not make any comments about me wearing the same attire in the last video over the Warriors game. I told you guys I'm recording these back to back because we had things happen in the same day. Come on, guys. Don't do this to me. Don't start trolling me in the comments. But anyways, trolling aside, Bojan signed a 2-year extension with the Detroit Pistons. Now, when this initially happened, I didn't know how exactly to look at this and what it meant. But as I let it settle and as the hours went by and the game played out, I came away with 3 possible angles that you could look at this, 3 possible situations of what it means, 3 possible things that it could mean that the Pistons gave him this extension right now. So the first angle we're going to look at is I think this one probably is the likeliest one. I think the second one also is pretty likely, but if I had to take a guess, I think this one's the most likeliest reason or angle to look at this from. And it's the fact that next year's free agency class sucks. It's not that great. So Bojan was on an expiring contract. The Pistons had like $70 million in cap space. If he would have just, let's say he left next year or he expired next year, then you signed him back for like 2 years. That would be basically the same thing what they just did just now. And Bojan probably would be at the top or towards the top their free agency list. Like if he wasn't on this team already and he was willing to go to like an up and coming team, he would probably be towards the top of their free agent list nonetheless. So they probably looked at next year's free agency class, saw that they had someone on the team that they felt like helped them right now and fits pretty well with what they want right now, and was like, listen, for $19-20 million, we don't see anybody else in free agency next year. And they, by the way, they still have $45 million in cap space, so it's not like they used all of it. But like basically, they probably could have gave like 3 guys $20+ million next year in free agency. And for one of those slots, let's just say they were looking to spend $20 million on each player. And for one of those slots, they basically said, well, we're not going to find 3 guys that we want more than Bojan next year. So we might as well just give this to him now and extend him and have him be basically our free agency signing, one of our free agency signings next season. Just to hammer this home, let's go ahead and look at some of the guys that are in free agency next season. So you got Chris Middleton, who's on a player option. He'll probably opt into that. James Harden probably opt into that, his player option. But those guys weren't going to come to the Pistons. Russell Westbrook, you don't want Russell Westbrook. Just stop. Kyrie Irving, I don't think you want Kyrie Irving either. Kristaps Porzingis, he had a player option, but I don't think you'd want him. I think he might opt into that anyways. Kevin Love is actually an interesting unrestricted free agent, but I think he goes back to Cleveland. I think Kevin Love actually would have been sort of the same thing that Bojan was. A nice veteran piece who knows how to play, shoots the ball really well, nice offensive player. So I think he probably would have been a low-key signing that I don't think he would come to the Pistons, to be honest. But I think that would be someone, if they didn't do this signing with Bojan or just didn't have Bojan, I think Kevin Love low-key might have been on their list. D'Angelo Russell, no. Al Horford, probably not. He's really old. Getting up there, he's going to be 37. Probably not. Nikola Vucevic, no. I don't think so. Draymond, I don't think so. I think when you really start going to the guys that the Pistons might have been looking at, maybe Harrison Barnes in free agency, maybe Miles Turner. I don't know. Maybe Karis LeVert. Maybe Will Barton. Like that kind of stuff. Kyle Kuzma has a player option, but I think he's going to take that. I think actually one guy that I think they will be going after, and I think they're still going to go after him even after this, is Kelly Oubre. I still think they should probably go after Kelly Oubre, but he's another guy I think they probably would be going after. Cam Johnson, another guy. But none of these names, like I can keep going and keep going and keep going, but none of these names are like big. I don't know if you guys would call it big time game changers. They're not big stars. It's not like this is a star-studded free agency class when the Pistons go out there and offer a mega max deal like for $35+ million to any of these guys. Free agency class next year isn't all that great. So while I still think they, with the $45 million, they'll go after some of those guys, they just looked at Bojan and was just like, look, he's there's not three guys that we're going to like better at this number in that free agency class. Let's go ahead and just lock up Bojan, see if he's interested in it. Oh, you're interested in it? Cool. We'll take it. And it's a good team-friendly deal. It's a nice deal for Bojan. He gets some security, and the Pistons get a guy who's played absolutely fantastic for them this season. And hopefully at the age of 33, he doesn't drop off too far going into next year or the rest of this year. But yeah, I thought it was a nice deal. It makes sense on that front if that's how they're looking at it. So that's the first angle. I think that's the most likely thing they probably were thinking about in their head at the very top. But there is also a second angle that I think is right behind it. I think it's literally right behind it. And we'll talk about that when we come back. But first, I got to tell you about one of our sponsors, BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for betting, football, and the start of the new basketball season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every single game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for our sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport that's out there. The fastest and easiest way to check out on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, golf, tennis, any sport, you name it. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about their trends in action today. And if you head over to betonline.net and you click on that basketball section, you'll see that they already have the favorites for championship odds. They have the favorites for Sixth Man of the Year, MVP, Rookie of the Year, all that stuff, Defensive Player of the Year. All of that you can find already over there at betonline.net. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about their trends and action today. BetOnline, where the game starts. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. All right, so Bojan's extension. I guess I probably should have. I think I kind of sold by not doing this. I just got straight into the podcast. I should have read you guys what the numbers actually were on this podcast or on this extension for Bojan. So the numbers for Bojan Bogdanovic's contract extension. It's a 2-year extension. He's going to be getting paid $39.1 million over the course of it. It has no trade restrictions. And yeah, extension for 2 more years. So yeah, I think I probably should have started off the podcast letting you guys know that number, but I just got straight into it. I was too excited. That's my fault, everybody. So anyways, what's the second angle that I'm looking at this from the Pistons side? So again, like I said, I think the first angle that we talked about in the first segment probably is the most likely one. But I think this second one is right behind it. And that's trading him. And we talked about that, I believe, like 3 episodes ago on the podcast. But he was a rental at that time. He probably wasn't, from what I was talking about, it didn't look like he was probably going to re-sign with the rebuilding team next year. He probably would want to go on a vet team, go to a team that he can actually win for, etc., that kind of thing. He was on an expiring contract, and there's going to be teams, contenders, that really want to pluck him off the Pistons. So maybe the Pistons could, get another first-round pick in this year's draft, a draft that is extremely stacked. And Troy Weaver, who is a big draft guy, and that's where he makes his money. If you can get him another first-round pick in a draft that's stacked, that would be fantastic. And if you can do that by giving up basically Saban Lee and Kelly Olynyk, you basically could get a first round out of that. I thought that would be a fantastic move, and I thought that was probably something they were considering. However, something I didn't, I guess I probably didn't put as much stock as I should have into is the fact that he was on an expiring contract. And it was probably going to be extremely unlikely for a contending team to go after Bojan, knowing that he could be just a rental. Why are we going to give up viable pieces for a guy that may just leave in 2 months? Why would we give up some of our future, some of our assets for a guy that may leave in 2 months, for a guy that maybe we could just go get in free agency since he's expiring contract? Now, the counter to that would have been, and I probably would have tried to make this counter, but I understand probably it would have taken the team probably be a little desperate, the Los Angeles Lakers, but nonetheless, my counter to that probably would have been, well, if a team really is pushing for the playoffs this year and they need him now, they'll probably eat that future asset and just take the chance that he'll come back. Nonetheless, that was a risk that probably would keep a lot of teams from trading for him. Now, he's got a 2-year extension for next year and the year after. So you got security. He has security. And a team that could possibly trade for him has security knowing that he's not going to be leaving after this year. He's not going to be gone next year. You have him from 2 years now. You have him 2.5 years. Let's say they trade for him at the trade deadline. You have him 2.5 years now. So you have him for the stretch playoff run if you're a contender trying to get him. And then you have him for the next 2 playoff runs that you're trying to go after. So I think this would make teams much more comfortable in trading for him now. And again, like I said, this extension has no trade restrictions on it. They could have put trade restrictions on it. They could have been, he can't be traded until this certain date. There is none of that. He is capable of being traded at any moment now. He can be traded at any moment. At least that's what Bobby Marks tweeted out. If I'm understanding his tweet correctly, he says there is not a single trade restriction on it. The Pistons can trade him at any moment. And I know there's been a little bit of a pushback about, why would you trade Bojan? He's been fantastic for the Pistons. This is why you would consider trading Bojan. You would consider trading him, one, because he's 33 and he's playing the best he's ever played. So you capitalize on that high value while you can, especially now that you got him on a longer-term contract. Teams will be willing to take him now. So, one, he's 33, he's playing extremely high, so you take advantage of his value. 2, the team is going nowhere this year. They're not going to the playoffs. They're not going to the championship. They're not competing for a championship or anything like that. They're going really nowhere in that kind of thing. Now, not in their actual rebuild. They're not going anywhere. I don't mean it like that. But as far as this season goes, from a contention kind of standpoint, they're not going anywhere. The Pistons are probably going to be a bottom 5 to 6 team this year. So it's not like he's adding wins to the team. And if you can flip a 33-year-old for another first-round pick in a stacked draft to add to your young core, you 100% absolutely do it. Now, the first-round pick and what the trade would have to make sense and would have to be pretty enticing for the Pistons to do it. And I think it also adds that level to it, the extension that is. I think that adds another level to it that the Pistons don't have to trade him now. I think they'll be looking to. I think they definitely will be listening to trade offers. I think Troy Weaver knows that contenders are going to be looking at Bojan as one of the main people that they can go after and probably a guy who will be the most available that can help them immediately. I think he knows that. So I think 100% you're going to hear rumors about the Pistons shopping him and seeing what his value is. But now that you have him under 2 years, you could probably look at it a different way. Weaver beforehand was probably looking at it like, look, he's a rental. So do I just let him finish out this year and take as much value from what he can give these young guys and, what he can provide on the court for this year and just let him ride off after that? He just leaves. Or do I try to flip this value for a guy who's not going to be here in 2 months that's on an expiring contract and may sign somewhere else? Do I flip him for a first-round pick? Which one do I do? And then also you're dealing with, like we said earlier, with the whole, will the team want to give you a good offer for a guy that's on an expiring contract? So the Pistons, to be honest, before this, probably were in an uncomfortable position about what they should do with Bojan, and it was more of a riskier kind of path that they had to choose. Either pathway maybe was a little bit more riskier. But now that they've done the extension, they don't have to just take any trade offer. If they thought that he was just going to be an expiring contract and he was just going to be, a rental, that he's going to be gone in 2 months after this, they probably would be like, okay, we have to try flip him for something. We got to take what we can. And teams probably would lowball him, etc. Now, teams know he's on there for 2 years now. The Pistons don't have to trade him this year. They don't have to trade him in the offseason. They don't have to trade him next year. They have 2 years that they could possibly trade him if they actually wanted to trade him. So now the Pistons have a little bit more leverage, I think, and they feel a little bit more comfortable with where they're at with the Bojan situation. And they don't have to trade him. So I think this actually probably could make his value go even higher, especially if he continues to play this way. He plays this well on a team-friendly contract. Forever team goes after him too. This is not an overpay. This is barely $20 million. This is an extremely good contract to get Bojan on. So it's a team-friendly deal. He's a vet. He's a shooter. He's going to provide spacing for whatever team would want him. He's playing the best basketball of his career, and you have him long term. All that stuff, I feel like if you combine them together, now has made Bojan's trade value go from here to here. So if the Detroit Pistons do decide to trade Bojan, I think they now will get him for a better trade offer than they probably would have gotten last week, comparing where he didn't have the extension. So I think that's something that they're going to consider doing. I don't know if they will. And that comes down, and that kind of segues us into what my third angle is that you could look at it from this extension. We'll talk about that third angle when we come back. But first, you guys got to hear from some of our lovely sponsors. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. All right, so we went through two different angles, but now this is a third angle that you could possibly look at this from with this Bojan extension. And it could be, and honestly, I feel like this was probably the case. This was probably the case anyways, but you could probably look at it as like it reaffirms this stance in that the Pistons will be pushing hard next season to not only be a play-in team, but a playoff team. And the reason why I look at it like that, and it kind of is going back to the very first segment, is that they have a lot of money in free agency next year. Before this extension, they had around $70 million. And like we talked about, free agency is not great next year. It's not a bunch of stars in this free agency class. And going to the next year, you're going to have Cade in his third year, probably going to be making another jump. Jane Ivey going into his second year, making another jump. The fourth-year players, if they're all still on the roster, I don't know how many of them will be on the roster, but at the very least, I probably think Sadiq will probably be on the roster still. So Sadiq making another jump. So putting all that together, and you have probably another top pick from this draft. Heading into next year, Pistons were probably going to be trying to push for a play-in next year. But now you get Bojan, who is a great fit so far with what we're seeing. He's playing amazing basketball. He provides that spacing that you desperately need. And not just spacing, by the way. I kind of want to segue into something else real quick. He hasn't been just providing spacing for the Pistons. He's just been flat out providing scoring, whether it's from the three-point line, whether it's in the mid-range area, whether it's even been at the rim, the free throw line. This dude's out here looking like a bona fide all-star 3-level scorer. Like, Bojan's playing the best he's ever played in his career. And I actually was scrolling through Twitter the other day, and I saw his name pop up in Most Improved Player of the Year award. Like, I saw a ranking have him in there. And I was like, dude, this dude's 33 years old. How the hell is he in Most Improved? But he's playing the best basketball of his career. So he's providing just a straight-up scorer for the Detroit Pistons. So they could be looking at this as, okay, we're going to spend this money on Bojan. He probably would have been at the top of our list in free agency anyways. And now that we have him, who's playing really well, we're going to go out there and we're going to make some other splashes in free agency. We think Bojan can be our biggest splash in free agency. And now we can go to free agency next year and add to a Bojan, Cade, Ivy, Sadiq, and whoever else, Duran, all these other guys. You can add to them with, let's say, a Miles Turner. You can add maybe a Kelly Oubre, a Cam Johnson, who knows, some other, and there's a lot of guys available that are like kind of role player. PJ Washington, a PJ Washington type of player. You could go out there, you can sign multiple of these guys, and really you don't even have to spend like $20+ million on each guy. You could go out there next year in free agency and maybe just fill out the roster, completely replace this roster, the majority of the roster, with a bunch of guys who aren't 21 years old, that aren't 20 years old, and can help you immediately try to go for a play-in or playoff position. Heck, maybe a top 8 seed next season, now that Cade will be taking another step into his third season. Like, I don't know. Let's look at some of these names again. Harrison Barnes, would you want to do Harrison Barnes? Probably not. I think what they should look for, if Bojan is still on the roster, I don't think they'll be starting Bojan and Sadiq together. I think one of them will be coming off the bench. Because I don't think defensively you can really sustain with that. So maybe you go after a Cam Johnson, and you start Cam Johnson at the 4, and now you got Cade, Ivy, Sadiq, Cam Johnson, and Jalen Duran possibly. Maybe you get Miles Turner too. maybe then you have a Cade, Jane Ivey, Sadiq, Stu, Miles Turner lineup with Bojan being your sixth man, possibly winning sixth man of the year next year. Or heck, maybe you put Bay on the sixth man of the year. Maybe you make Bay the sixth man. Now you have a lineup of Cade, Ivey, Bojan, either Cam Johnson and Duren, or maybe you have Miles Turner and Duren. Who knows? I think having Bojan, if that's the case, if that's the route they want to go, you can go out and get a bunch of role players, not guys who are superstars, but you can get role players like that to bring onto your team that can really help the Pistons next year try to be a playoff team and sign them to team-friendly contracts like Bojan. So when a star does become available, you have young assets and you have team-friendly contracts. You don't have these disgusting contracts that no one wants a part of. You can have a bunch of team-friendly contracts. And we're not even talking about Bagley yet, who will be returning soon. I've kind of forgot about Bagley because he's been gone. But even Bagley, he'll be on like a 2-year contract. That's not too crazy. It's $13 million a year. Maybe you can combine those salaries with some young assets, and eventually when a star wants out, you can go after them. So I think that's just another way you can look at this, is that the Pistons are going to be pushing hard for the playoffs, not just to play in the playoffs next year. And I think that Bojan is going to be a big part of it. And they think they can go and add a bunch of role players around that. And entering another year with Cade and all the young guys, they can really push for it. Who knows? I think that possibly could be a legitimate thing that they're doing. And I could see it. I really could see it. They have to hit on the right guys, though. They would need to have the right kind. I'm kind of mad that we're already talking about next offseason already. It's only 7 games into the year. But either way, you have to make the right contracts, make it team friendly. You can't make these contracts too crazy, and you have to get the right players. I really think a Kelly Oubre, Cam Johnson, a Miles Turner, like one of those guys. I think that those guys are like this type of players that I'm looking at here. I'm running maybe even a Rui Hachimura. I really would like the Pistons to go after him. I would really like him on the Pistons. I really, really like Rui Hachimura. So maybe him. Who knows? He's a restricted free agent, though. There's a few restricted free agents they possibly could go after, but restricted free agents are really hard to get on your team. It's usually a waste of time. You don't see many restricted free agents end up leaving. They usually just match it. So, and also another thing I haven't brought up, maybe, I mean, Killian Hayes has played like trash this year, and this is coming from Killian Hayes believer, but maybe with Bojan, maybe they go out there next year and spend some money on a backup point guard. Maybe you see a Tyus Jones come over. Maybe you see, what are some other, I just saw a few other point guards on this list. Either way, my overall point is that they can take Bojan. If they think Bojan's the guy that they want to spend their money on for free agency next year, they can add some more role players around him, around these other guys. And then all of a sudden you have a really nice team of not just young guys, but also veterans with Bojan headlining that. That could be what they're trying to do. And I think that actually it might really work depending on how the young guys develop and what signings they actually make. But that's all I've got for you guys today with the Bojan extension. Overall, whatever route they end up taking, I think it's a good route. This contract's a really good contract. I don't have any complaints about it really at all. And team-friendly deal. I think this is a really nice move for Troy Weaver and gives the Pistons a lot more comfort and security in just about every angle we just talked about. And I'm sure there's probably some other ones that you guys can talk about. Let me know those ones in the comment section down below or over on Twitter @KukaHill. That's all I've got for you guys today, though. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Hit that subscribe button at the YouTube channel. 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until the next podcast, I'll see you guys later. Go Pistons, and peace out, everybody.